Hi, today we'll be looking at this Sirui 23mm f1.2 lens for Sony E mount. Sirui, although I heard one guy call it Suri. I guess it's like Nikon versus Nikon.
Duh, it's Nikon. Sirui calls this their Sniper series of lenses.
The Sirui company makes this lens for Nikon and Fuji mount as well, but today we'll be looking at it on a Sony A6400 E mount camera. Sirui also has the 1.2 in a 33mm and 56mm variety, but I'm choosing to review the 23mm APS-C because that's equivalent to 35mm in full frame terms, and we all know that's a really popular focal length for photographers. So I chose one to compare this lens with to give it a point of reference, and that's a Viltrox 23mm 1.4 for Sony E mount. They are both a fairly similar size and weight, although the Sirui is a bit heavier. Now, Viltrox did recently announce in early 2025 a 27mm 1.2 lens for APS-C. That gets you to 40mm equivalent, so it's a little tighter. It's also somewhat bigger and about double the price. So I think it's best to compare these two lenses. So in this video, we're going to examine the physical differences of the lenses, the features, we'll look at test charts, and more importantly, we'll take them out into the real world to see what they look like, and I'll give you my final thoughts and opinions.
So it's a 1.2 versus a 1.4, both go to f16. Both lenses have USB ports, the Viltrox the older micro USB and the Sirui the more modern USB-C. These are for firmware upgrades, I believe, but not really to control the lens parameters. The Sirui has the larger 58mm filter thread versus 52 for the Viltrox. It's a little heavier by a little over 120 grams, and it gives you more lens for the money though. 11 blades versus 9 blades in the Viltrox. The Sirui has 12 elements in 11 groups versus 11 elements in 10 groups for the Viltrox. Both claim the same minimum focusing distance of around a foot. We'll check that. The same price. The Sirui comes in 3 colors, white, silver, and black. Only black for the Viltrox, but the Viltrox gives you a dedicated aperture ring.
Well, my thoughts on the construction of these lenses, they both feel nice. The Sirui has a beefy feel to it. It's a metallic lens with a kind of a cool blue stripe. The Viltrox is a mixture of plastic and metal. It has a little orange C. They both are not too heavy. Again, the Sirui is a bit heavier, a bit longer, but both feel very solid in the hands. Now you'll notice I have the white version of the lens, and I kind of like the fact that you have different colors from which to choose. This is what it looks like on a A6400 on a black body. With the Viltrox, there is only black, but on the Viltrox, you do have an aperture ring instead. Now it's interesting, the aperture ring on the Viltrox is not clickable. It's just smoothly turning, except it does click at 16 and then it clicks in the auto position, but it doesn't click after that. Now they both come with nice lens hoods and little pouches for transport. I generally don't use the lens hoods, but I may reconsider that, and you'll see why a little later in the video. Just so you know, neither of these lenses have built-in stabilization, and I'm using it on a Sony A6400, which also has no in-body image stabilization, so the footage is not going to be stabilized, but since they're fast lenses, they're wide-angle lenses, relatively speaking, it's not really a problem. If you have shaky hands taking video, you may see an issue, and I really didn't find it to be a major problem, but it's something to keep in mind. Now, naturally, if you have an A6500, 66, or 6700, those cameras have in-body image stabilization. You won't have a problem.
And you can certainly use these lenses on a full-frame camera with stabilization like the A7R5 here. Of course, it'll put it into crop mode, but it'll still give you that 35mm field of view, and it's a lot cheaper than getting a 35mm full-frame lens.
So I want to start off with one of the first questions I have about these lenses is the 1.2 versus the 1.4. How much of a difference is it? It's actually about a half a stop difference, which is a little counterintuitive because 1.2 seems pretty close to 1.4, but a 1.2 lens actually captures about 44% more light than a 1.4 lens. So let's see how that translates into some real world testing.
Now in a super dark room with the ISO cranked all the way up to 12,800, here's the 1.4 versus the 1.2 Sirui, and you can see it's definitely brighter. And if you look at the column in the background, it's a little more out of focus on the Sirui, and also just look in general near the left, you can see it's just brighter overall. It's slight, but you can see it. At ISO 6400, it's a little more apparent. The Sirui is definitely brighter and a little more of that background blur. But the bokeh is marginally different, as I can show you here. 1.2 versus 1.4, it's barely even noticeable. So don't think you're going to get a huge difference in that area.
Okay, let's go to some test charts now.
So here both lenses are wide open, 1.4 versus 1.2 for the Sirui. The corners are where there's always most trouble with lenses, and you can see it's kind of soft in the Sirui and a bit sharper in the Viltrox in the corner. Now in the center of the frame, they're a lot closer. Here's the Viltrox wide open versus the Sirui. The sharpness is very close. As we stop down on the Viltrox, it starts to sharpen up even more and brighten up, and at 5.6 is like a big jump in brightness. Now back to the corner in the Viltrox as we stop down, gets a bit sharper and brighter. Again, a big jump at 5.6 compared to the Sirui, which still kind of soft at 5.6, but a lot better than it is at 1.2. As you stop down on the Sirui, and this is the corner, it's still a little fuzzy, gets a little better, but stays a little weak in the corner. Now this is the center with the Sirui wide open. As we stop down, we start seeing some improvements, but it's not a huge difference, so it's very consistent across the aperture range. Pin, cushion, and distortion, the Viltrox looks very good. The Sirui has some issues on the edges. You see some bowing. And looking at some artwork on the New York City subway system walls, you see these lines, and they are a little bit bent, but there are programs that can correct this. Let's look at the sharpness at the closest focusing distance. Here's the Viltrox and here's the Sirui. I would say both do fairly well, but they both claim the same minimum focusing distance. This is how close I can get with the Viltrox versus the Sirui. It seems I can get in a little closer with the Viltrox for some reason. Something that a chart doesn't pick up, especially outdoors, notice the Viltrox and Sirui color rendition. It seems a little warmer here.
So I did read about this online, that the Sirui tends to have slightly warmer images. In my opinion, I don't know, I find this image to be a little more pleasing, the warmer colors, but what is more accurate? So in order to try and determine that, I took out my Sony A7R5 with a Tamron lens, which is pretty neutral. And here's the image here, and I think it's sort of like in between the two. So I think it's just a matter of personal preference. Again, I personally just find that it looks a little more neutral, a little more pleasing. The Viltrox just looks a little redder and a little cooler. But just be advised of this, because in case you're mixing footage from two different cameras, the white balance may be off. Of course, you can adjust that in editing, but just something I want to make you aware of.
Let's take a quick look at autofocus. Here is the Viltrox, and again, I'm using this on an A6400. You see a little bit of pulsing right there, and that may very well be because it's an older camera. You know, the newer 6000 series have more modern autofocuses, but it seems to be confidently going from one to the other fairly well, and the Sirui does a very similar job. Again, there's that slight hesitation there when it goes to the tide. I would say for the most part, the autofocuses look pretty good, pretty consistent, and not really a big difference from one to the other.
Neither of these lenses had any problem with focus breathing, very controlled. But one thing I want to point out is the focus throw difference between these lenses. The Sirui has a very long focus throw. I was kind of surprised, but when I was focusing, it was like I was turning and turning and turning before I saw substantial results. The Viltrox has a much shorter throw, and I guess it's just something I'm more accustomed to.
So here's some low light footage taken with each camera side by side, and you can judge which lens you think has the edge. I see a little less flaring here on the Sirui versus the Viltrox. Beautiful bokeh here on the Sirui. Nice neutral color rendition, even at night. A very nice organic look to the photos, and you can not only take pictures of people through windows, but it also does a great job with portraits. 35mm is a great focal length for portraits, and also to get a nice autofocus background. I didn't have the lens hood on with the Sirui, and the sun was coming through at a strong angle. Notice that little rainbow type of dot, and here it is hidden in her hair. I think the next time I'm going to use a lens hood, but look at all the nice detail even when you crop in. Now the Viltrox is no slouch for detail either. Nice, beautiful, rich image with good colors too. Hey, if you can't decide on which lens to get, maybe get both, just like this woman is eating both slices of pizza at the same time. Going to the maximum f/16 to check sunstars, they look very different. A lot more pinpointy on the Viltrox. And again, both lenses are perfectly suited to video. A nice 35mm wide angle field of view makes these lenses very versatile indeed.
So what's the verdict? Well, out in the real world, both these lenses can produce some very nice, pleasing images. You can use them for portraits. You can use them for low light if you want to create nice bokeh, and they're nice and small and light. If you want the ultimate in speed, the fastest possible lens at a very reasonable price, the Sirui, I think, is a great option, especially if you like the different colors. It is a little heavier, and of course it has some trouble in the corners. If you're a purist and you want the best overall image quality, including the corners, then you may want to consider the Viltrox. But the Sirui has a very pleasing image as well. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I tend to like the slightly warmer colors of the Sirui. To me, that's kind of pleasing. Of course, you can always adjust your colors later. So the choice is yours, but I appreciate you watching this video, and I hope this sheds some light. If it helped you, please do hit the like button and subscribe. More lens reviews, camera reviews, old gear, new gear, they all meet here at Tech to Remember. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.